Hello, my name is Bill Martin. I teach sculpture and 3D foundations here at Rhode Island College, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my latest sculpture. This one is called Veiled Seeds. It looks a little bit more organic than work in the past. The previous work has been very, very mechanical, but they've all been inspired by some sort of biological process like reproduction or hunting or flying or walking. And there might have been hints at that kind of shape language of natural inspiration in there, but they were pretty mechanical. But sprinkled in through my sketchbooks would be research images of microscopic things, plants, fungus, wild animals, zoo animals. And so they would be sprinkled all throughout my sketchbook. And I always loved those things, but never worked really directly from them. So sort of saw them as things that I could abstract from, inspiration for other things. But in the latest series, I've started to address what I think is really sort of visually stunning about those things that I love in the sculpture. So this one looks a little bit more biological. The top of it comes from a fungus called a veiled lady, or sometimes called a stinkhorn fungus. I think they're related species. So the top comes from fungus, the lower parts are from things like dandelion seeds, so the lower part, the stem part with the seed at the bottom, minus the parachute part at the top of a dandelion seed. So that's kind of where the parts are coming from. As far as the construction of them, I'm a pretty traditional maker, craftsperson, material worker, artist, and that still carries over from the previous work. So you see things like the stem parts are laminated wood to get that curve out of them. The lower paddle part has been steam bent and then carved and shaped afterwards. The surfaces are paint, asphaltum, which is essentially tar, thinned down to get this sort of weathered kind of surface, and a lot of working the surface to give it a kind of patina and age. The lower part has been dyed to get that sort of sharp, bright contrast to the wood parts. The thing that's also construction-wise sort of different is the top part. That was generated digitally from a hexagonal pattern and sort of in Photoshop stretched and manipulated it. So normally I'm drafting to generate my shapes much the way that older craftsmen would have drawn things out with drafting tools to work out engineering drawings. And I wanted the pieces to have that kind of aesthetic. So I worked in the same method for my work. Whereas this one I was able to kind of come up with something from a very geometric pattern and make it look more organic by manipulating it and stretching it digitally. I'm kind of excited about a couple new possibilities of the new sculptures, one of which is scale. The machine-based pieces, I felt like they had to be a certain scale to make them seem like a believable machine, as opposed to miniaturized and looking toy-like. And I think with the more naturally inspired things, I have more latitude to try smaller things and larger things, and it still looks believably like something from nature. So I'm kind of excited about the kind of possibilities that opens up for me. And then also the digital part, while that was sort of generated digitally, it was pretty analog in the making of the metal part, but I'm looking forward to 3D printing, CNC milling, to make patterns to cut metal to, things like that. So always kind of trying to bring in new challenges, new techniques into the construction of the works. So the collaboration pieces with Craig and I tend to come in groups of 2, 3, 4 pieces, and that has to do with when we have work time to kind of collaborate on things. We tend to kind of work throughout the semester making parts that we sort of surprise each other with and challenge each other with, and that tends to be the kind of coming together of the pieces tends to be over the summer. And so that amount of time frame, we can kind of manufacture, like I said, 2, 3, 4 pieces, and they tend to look kind of like little groups of 2, 3, 4 of them each time. And as you saw from my previous work, it's looking more organic, and I think that that's sort of filtered into these pieces, where the previous ones looked more mechanical. These have more biomorphic kind of shape language, and I think it's kind of funny that Craig, the pieces that he gave me also look like seed pods, barnacles, viruses, or something like that. So it's kind of funny, we're sort of both, without talking to each other, sort of shifting interests in a similar sort of way. The colors and textures and things like that, a lot of times I think of the ceramic as being the shiny pretty part, and I tend to, for contrast, tend to show off the textures and surfaces in a little bit grungier way sometimes. So it's got that contrast between the ceramics and the parts that I make. Although I will say that Craig, because he's making sculptural parts for me, I think he's also kind of expanded his range of what kind of surfaces he would put on pottery also, and in some cases they are more irregular and broken, and as opposed to a glossy ceramic kind of surface. So I think that the collaborations have kind of challenged us both to try different things in response to what the other person is doing, to come up with some sort of nice unified collaborative pieces. The scale on the pieces that Craig and I have been making tend to be a little bit smaller than that. Some of that's dictated by, he's focused on pottery, and the pieces that he's making on the pottery wheels are of a certain scale, so I kind of have to work with that. Although I will say that times that I've given him the initial starting place, it's kind of forced him to go a little bit larger than normal. So it's kind of interesting where you see sort of deviation from what we normally do based on the challenges of working in collaboration with each other.